Hey guys, today we're talking about what the world looked like after the end of World War II, and exactly how that war and the aftermath actually affected the United States and what changes we saw there. Our objective question today is, how did World War II and its aftermath change the United States? All right, so prior to the end of the war, this is going a little bit backwards here. We have the Yalta Conference, and the Yalta Conference takes place in the Soviet Union. It's a meeting between the major three Allied leaders, that's FDR, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. And the idea is they want to get together and come up with a plan for Europe after the war. So listen, guys, we're probably going to win this. It's probably going to be soon. Let's figure out how we're going to handle our victory, because the Treaty of Versailles didn't really go that well. If we've learned anything, it's that maybe Woodrow Wilson was right with his 14 points. So what we need to do is kind of shear up our plan. This is kind of an extension of what they already established in the Atlantic Charter between FDR and Churchill, but Joseph Stalin's involved in this. Now, it's no coincidence that the meeting actually takes place in the Soviet Union, because Joseph Stalin refused to do it any other place. He claimed that he was sick and he was ill and he wasn't able to travel, so the two other leaders would have to come to him, when in fact he was actually afraid to fly. So instead, the two other leaders, FDR and Churchill, meet Stalin in the Soviet Union. Stalin makes sure that the whole place is covered in spies and listening devices and anything he can have to get as much information from FDR and Churchill. So if Stalin's ever outside of the room and Churchill and FDR want to kind of speak to one another, they know that they're probably being listened to. So this was definitely like a frenemy situation from the very, very beginning. And this is just evidence that later on Joseph Stalin will be an issue for us. As I mentioned, the Yalta Conference, the peace plan, right? The idea that what we need to do is make sure we don't repeat the Treaty of Versailles, and the United Nations is going to be an aspect of that. With the Yalta Conference, as decided already in the Atlantic Charter, we would create some kind of collective security group, some kind of international alliance, and under Woodrow Wilson's peace plan, that of course was the League of Nations, which didn't really work out, but now we're saying, yes, for sure, we're going to do that. The United States will be a member of that, and it will be referred to as the United Nations. So that's where that really stems from. Other things that are going on, the Nuremberg war trials. Oh my goodness. Because the Nazis did such terrible things during World War II, because we've seen what everybody is capable of, we hoped humans weren't capable of it, but they are, we need to make sure that these actions don't go unpunished. So the war trials, the Nuremberg war trials, are going to put Nazis on trial for the things that they did during war. Now, this is an interesting turning point. This is the first time that nations' leaders are actually going to be put on trial for the things that they've done during wartime. Before that, we've kind of brushed it off as, well, all's fair in love and war. But it's not. So the war trials, we're going to put a number of Nazi leaders up on trial, and quite a few of them are going to be convicted. Now, did we get all the Nazis? Absolutely not. Tons and tons of Nazis have already fled, but we get the major leaders as best we can. Here is a list brought to you by Wikipedia of the Nazis tried in the Nuremberg trials. As you can see, a majority of them are found guilty, a few are acquitted, and a lot of them end up committing suicide. All right. Another aspect that we need to cover is the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Codes are not new. There's been a few of them prior to World War II. But the convention that's held after World War II in terms of Geneva has to deal with the treatment of POWs. And this is no surprise, because we saw some horrible things, right? We feel that this is justified because we saw the Holocaust, we saw concentration camps, we saw the Bataan Death March, where Japanese soldiers forced American and Filipino soldiers to march 65 miles, and a lot of people died during that. Also the rape of Nanking, which is exactly how, it sounds. A bunch of Japanese soldiers march into a Chinese city and literally just start to have a contest on who can rape the most people, right? Just terrible things that occurred during World War II, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So the Geneva Convention, the main goal is to make sure that this horrible stuff doesn't happen, and to guarantee rights internationally for prisoners of war. Cool. Does the United States follow it? Cough, cough, kind of. Another thing that's going on is America is going to occupy Japan. So Japan surrenders and we move in, and we basically become their guardian, their parent, their supervisor. The man put in charge of this is Douglas MacArthur. Very, very important figure, of course, in World War II, the supreme commander of all Pacific troops. he is now in control of Japan and occupying it there. He's going to help them draw up a constitution called the MacArthur Constitution. Looks very similar to ours, and they still use it today. One important aspect of Japan is that even though Tojo was, the leader, the prime minister, there was also an emperor named Hirohito. And even though Hirohito was technically, the leader of our enemy state, we actually allow Emperor Hirohito to remain in power because the Japanese truly believed that the emperor was godlike and that if anything bad happened to him, horrible things would happen. And MacArthur, aptly predicted that if we did something to the emperor, the Japanese would resist, and we'd have a whole nother mutiny revolution on our hands. So we allow the emperor to stay in place, and that's mostly because we were able to deduct that he had pretty much nothing to do with the war. He kind of just hid out the whole time. It was Tojo who we really wanted. Which brings us to this. It's not just the Nazis that get tried. The Japanese also are going to be put on trial for the crimes that they committed. 28 of them are tried. 25 of them are convicted. Tojo being one of those. He attempted to commit suicide. He was holed up in some mountain cottage in the woods of Japan for quite a while. And he knew that eventually one day the Allies were going to track him down and bring him in. So he decided that when that time came, if he was ever found, he was going to shoot himself and commit suicide so he couldn't be tried. So every day when he woke up, he would put a little black sticker over his heart so he knew exactly where to point the gun. Well, we show up, he puts the gun to the little black spot, he pulls the trigger and he fires and he shoots himself in the chest and he doesn't die. We actually have a couple doctors that swoop in, save his life, so we can put him on trial and he can face what he did. Also, while he's in prison, he's in need of a new pair of dentures, and at first he thinks we're going to say, yeah, no teeth for you, but instead we make him a really nice set, and inside the set, in Morse code, we drill in the phrase, remember Pearl Harbor. So that's just one last little gotcha. And then he is eventually tried and executed. So the one major Axis bad guy who actually gets tried and stuff for what he did, because Mussolini was executed by his own people and Hitler killed himself. All right, cool. Impact on the war in America, and I'm going to kind of speed up a little bit, but these are things we've seen before. It's very similar to the end of World War I. Wages are going to rise, unemployment's going to drop, farming's going to increase. Women have proven themselves in the man's workplace, and unlike World War I, they'll actually stay in those areas. Population shifts, we see major military centers grow much larger. This is the explosion of the Hampton Roads area in Virginia. We also have the GI Bill. The GI Bill is a great way for individuals who fight in the military to earn a college for free. And also they're eligible for certain loans and stuff, low interest, no down payment kind of stuff that is not usually available to other individuals. So this is a great incentive to help bring in as many volunteer military people as we possibly can. Cool. Social adjustments, things that are going on. Men are going to work. Women are going to work. Now, women did this before in World War I, but when the men came back, they went back to their houses. Now women are saying, listen, we've proven that we can do this. We like working outside the home. We want to continue in the workforce outside of the home. And that seems to start to pick up, become more popular. At this point, we see children are starting to be cared for by people other than their parents. So that's kind of a new trend. The idea of like daycare and giving your child to someone during the day so you can go work is brand new. Women are going to start to go to college in higher numbers. The joke is that they're going for their MRS degree or their Mrs. degree because women are going to college to find a husband. That's the whole idea, but it's definitely a major trend. There's some major booms going on here. There's a housing boom. More individuals can afford houses. More people are buying houses, so houses are popping up all over the place. We're going to see a huge explosion of suburbs. Consumption's going to boom, and then, of course, our favorite, baby boom. Everyone comes home, all these high school sweethearts, they're so happy to see their guy who they thought sure would have been dead. He comes home, it's a miracle, let's get married, let's have children. That's what happens, right? It doesn't last long though. A lot of these relationships are going to end in divorce. This is where we get the term Dear John letters. These are letters that women would write to their poor husbands while overseas and break up with them. So anyway, okay boomer comes from this, right? The baby boom that occurred after World War II. What else is going on? African Americans, remember, are fighting in the military along with other minorities. Remember that, of course, because of Plessy v. Ferguson, these units are still segregated. So African Americans are totally allowed to fight, but they have to fight the way that, the military is going to allow them. Despite this, they did very, very well, especially the Tuskegee Airmen specifically did amazingly well in World War I and II. And they're proving themselves, and they're starting to get frustrated because they return home, these war heroes, right? And they're still living in this segregated society. They're still living under Jim Crow. It's very, very frustrating. However, jobs for African Americans, skilled jobs, are going to rise from 16% before the war to 30%. So that's a nearly double increase of African Americans working in skilled jobs. So that is, a uptrend, but not nearly, good enough. CORE in 1942 is going to help kind of combat some of the segregation that's going on in the North, specifically ways that we're going to help kind of push for this. Sit-ins, we're familiar with the sit-in process of protesting. We'll talk a lot more about this when we talk about our civil rights unit, but this is really kind of teeing that up, because what it's doing is showing exactly how divided things are in our society at this point and how far tensions have risen. Because at this point, even people who are on board with Booker T. Washington's idea of the gradual approach, even those people, the super patient people, are starting to say, how much longer do we have to wait? How many world wars do we have to fight for this country for us to finally be given equality? And they have a very, very valid point. So this is going to set us up for our civil rights era. That takes place, a majority of the main action, of course, in the 1960s, starts in the 1950s. So, all right, that's it. Make sure to answer your objectives question, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.